Hi, Dr. Ron England here, and we're going to talk about testing your code today. And not your usual, a lot of times you develop code and you test it by just running it and trying different things here. But I'd rather actually like to have it kind of automated. It makes sense to have some testing that's automated. And Visual Studio really does have that capability of providing automated test suites. There's also a lot of third-party add-on products that provide testing capability, so like NUnit. But we're going to just demonstrate the concepts of testing, automated testing, and how this works. So, and you might have noticed in Visual Studio, you got this menu up here that says test, but doesn't necessarily, you don't have any real tests. If you run all tests right now, it's not going to really do anything other than build your project, because there are no tests in the project right now. So we need to add some tests. So to do that, I'm just going to go up here to the solution. I got one project in the solution, and I'm going to actually go ahead and add a new project. This new project that I'm going to be adding is going to be an actual test project. So if you look in the Visual Studio here, you'll see that you actually have in here test, and I'm going to put a unit test project, and I'm going to actually call this unit test math, because I have some math routines in here that I want to do, and I can actually make these kind of reusable. So I'm going to click OK, and it's going to go ahead and build another project within my existing project. Well, one thing I've got to do first is, because this unit test math is in one project and Web Forms application 1 is where I'm going to be actually be testing, I do need to add a reference. To do this, I'm going to go into the solution projects, and I need to add a reference to Web Forms application 1 so that I can actually call the code in Web Forms application 1 in my test suite. Now let's talk about this test suite for a second. I've got a reference now to the project I want to test, and I can go to that project, and I've got here's what I want to test right now. I've got these math routines that I wrote called Quicksort. It's for doing some sorting. Of course, it can be anything that you're testing, but in this case, I'm trying to make it really straightforward to follow. I've got these routines, and I want to know that they're going to work. So over here, I've got this class in my test project called Unit Test 1. And if you notice, it's got some unique things here. It says test class. It shows here in the brackets, and then the test method. Well, it designates these as test methods and test classes. Now, I can go ahead and write by hand the test method that I want to test my math, but I've already written it, and I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me type for 20 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste it from over here, and I'll explain what I'm doing in here. What I'm doing is I have this test method quicksort. I want to test the sort, and I create an unsorted string, and then I sort it, and then I test to see if it's sorted correctly. So what's really important about the testing aspect of this, the rest of this is just, I've written a routine and it does this, but what's really important here is this assert. So in the unit testing, it allows me to assert whether something actually is true or false. And that is really part of the testing framework, so that if I want to run my tests, the assert tells me whether they worked or didn't work. Now, there's one slight problem I have here. I still do not have a reference to where the actual code is, so I do need to add that. So I'm going to add a using here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a using, and in this case, I'm going to be using Web Forms application 1. Web Forms application 1, and there it is. And then I'm going to be using the app code. So that's actually going to get used. Now, because I have the properties of math routines build action set to compile, it should automatically, when I go over here to my unit testings, it should automatically turn to math routines blue, because it's an actually existing class that it now has, it's visible. So essentially, I have created a new project, which is a test project. I have the test method, the test class. This test method up here doesn't do anything at all. I could add stuff to it, and it could. Really, the bottom line is, as long as you have these asserts in here, that's going to work. But then you can write some code in here that you use these objects that you've created in the other project, and then there's an assert to see if it worked. So for example, you could have it retrieve some data from the database, and you could do an assert to see if the data that comes back from the database is what was expected. Normally what you can do is you push something into the database and pull something from the database, and if it works, then you assert it, it's going to be exactly what you pushed into the database. That's kind of a good example of a test suite doing other things. Very straightforward though, because you get to call the code that you've written. So I could create some XML property objects, or I could use my sample class that I had from previous examples. So how do I actually run the tests? Well, it's pretty simple. I just go up here to test, and I hit run, and I can run all tests, and it's going to go ahead and build the entire project. So it's going to do a full project build, and then it's going to run them. And once the build has succeeded, it's then going to turn around and run the test suite. And over here in my testing window, I can see that my test method 1, well, it didn't do anything because there's nothing in it, but test method quicksort ran, and both assertions worked. You got a green light basically saying that all the asserts worked, and therefore the test suite ran successfully. So think about how you can use this. You can build this test project, build some test classes, and now as you're starting and building code, if you've got things that you know you want to work a certain way, you build a test class and a test method to make sure that they test, and then as you're writing your code, you come around and you retest on a regular basis, and if you've broken anything, you'll know immediately. Really straightforward. I mean, there's not tremendously more to this concept of unit testing other than that. The most important thing of unit testing is designing those unit tests so that they're truly useful, so that when you're doing coding, you know that you're not breaking something else. It's also very useful in multi-user environments where you get multiple people programming, because you can write a piece of code, you write your test suite that tests whether it's working correctly, and if anybody else comes back and breaks it, you know. So anyway, that is all for unit testing here. It's really that simple. So good programming.